All right, welcome to the April 10th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. I'm Jamie Finch, and I'll be your chair tonight. Due to the hybrid nature of this meeting, we'll have some members attending in person and some remotely. For those remotely, please say your name before speaking, mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and then raise your hand if you'd like to speak. For those here, please flip your name tag. Certain topics we'll summarize agreement around, recommendations, and please let me know if there's anything that I missed, and we'll help if there's any dissent. With that, Stacey, do you mind running us through attendance?
Tom Anderson.
Here.
Nancy Davidson.
Here.
Jamie Finch.
Here.
Raj Gopandi. Hi, Raj, can you hear us? Raj, we're unable to hear you. Okay, great. Raj is here. Joy Lewis has an excused absence. Ashwin Kanam.
Here.
Don McQuilliams.
Here.
Ann Newcomb has an excused absence. Janet Wall.
Here.
Dixie Bear has an excused absence, and Alex Lee Tigner is planning to join virtually. I don't know. Oh, and she just popped on. Good timing, Alex. We were just calling your name. Here. Great. Thanks. All right. So we did.
Thank you, Stacey. Do we have, I don't see any members of the public. Did any public comments to note?
No, there was no public comment. There was an email from Connie regarding the comprehensive plan and wildlife. She said to, it wasn't necessarily a comment, it was just an inquiry or to take it as information.
I think with that, then we will move into the minutes. Are there any comments on the minutes from February 26, 2024? Hearing none, those are approved by unanimous consent. And then are there any comments on the minutes from March 13th, 2024? Hearing none, those are approved by unanimous consent. And then with that, we'll move into our agenda item. The first one being Energy Smart Eastside, a potential electrification program expansion.
Great. So wanted to welcome Sarah Phillips here tonight. Sarah is a shared staff person. She's shared between 5 cities, but is housed at the city of Bellevue, and she manages the Energy Smart Eastside heat pump program. Tonight, we wanted to provide a deep dive into that program. It has been a pretty substantial investment in terms of resources, funding, and staff capacity, but it's also helping to address one of our biggest greenhouse gas emitters, which is residential energy use. So after Sarah provides kind of an overview and then dives deep into the data from the program, at the very end, we'll talk very briefly about some of the additional incentives or programming that we might be considering and the approach to further develop that. So I will hand it over to.
Great. Thank you. So I appreciate being here, having with all of you today. I've never been to this particular park at this venue, so that's really fun. And this board, of course, you work on environmental work all the time. You're really key to shaping climate policy at the city of Issaquah. And this program is really at the heart of, one of our key strategies for trying to meet our climate goals. So we go to the kind of overview of what we hope to do today. Let's kind of next slide. I really kind of have a few goals for you today as you walk away with a good understanding of Energy Smart Eastside and how it very, very concretely relates to achievement of your 2050 climate goals, and specifically trying the path to carbon neutral. We're going to talk about the different program tracks and how we're designing them to really foster an equitable energy transition. And we'll give you just an update on where are we at today. You know, what was the results of what I would call sort of the pilot phase in 2023? What are we really focused on to expand impact in 2024? And how are we thinking about scaling it? And we'll kind of then roll into the conversation on what different expansion opportunities might be. So Energy Smart Eastside is fundamentally a residential home electrification program. We connect residents with education, resources, and in some cases, financial assistance so that they can go electric. And the program today is really focused squarely on heat pumps. That's kind of where we're starting. So sort of from a branding perspective, we think about ourselves more broadly than that. But from a practical standpoint, our programming today is right around heat pumps. And as Stacy mentioned, this is a joint initiative of the cities of Bellevue, Issaquah, Kirkland, Redmond, and Mercer Island. So I mentioned that we're starting with heat pumps, and I just kind of want to give context, or why are we starting there? This is a slide that kind of represents your most recent greenhouse gas inventories. I know Stacy has walked you through this previously. But a quarter of emissions in Issaquah are from residential. And, you know, the good news on that is on the electricity front, that is going to get cleaner over time. So Puget Sound Energy has a mandate based on state legislation that they need to be moving off of oil and gas, of course. And so over time, the emissions from just running electricity are going to diminish significantly. But at the same time, 78% of single family homes in particular in Issaquah have gas space heating. And as we know, space heating is one of the biggest energy consumers in the home. And if you have a gas furnace, you probably also have a gas water heater. You might have other gas appliances as well. And so if we're going to hit that target in 2050 of achieving carbon neutrality, we really need to start figuring out how do we move folks off of gas and onto electricity. One of the interesting things that I wanted to answer early on is just what is the emission savings if we install a heat pump? And if you just look at it kind of from like year one, it's about 1 ton. So if you take a 1,500 square foot house and you move from a gas furnace to a heat pump, it's about 1 ton of CO2 emissions averted. But if you think about that over time, and you think about the compounding fact of the grid getting cleaner over time, it really expands massively. And so if you were to go into a home and replace it with a heat pump, a gas furnace with a heat pump today, you're looking at 62K in emissions averted over the lifetime of that appliance. And then if you think about that, well, like, what is that in concrete terms? That's like a car for the lifetime, a gas-powered car for the lifetime that you might have it. And so it's really, really significant. And if you think about them stacking, like replacing a water heater on top of that, you're up to 86K in CO2 savings over the lifetimes of those appliances. So it really is, in terms of kind of like bang for the buck and having a major impact, starting to foster this behavior change and making it possible and affordable for people is super important. This is a slide I show all day long, every day. It's from Rewiring America. Some of you may have seen it before. This is showing King County data, but what I can tell you is Issaquah maps roughly to what we see in King County overall. So heat pumps, the good news is heat pumps are increasing as a percentage of residential HVAC sales. But if you see that line on the bottom, what that's showing you is sort of a linear projected growth of what we call business as usual growth in heat pump sales. So it's going to continue to go up. But what the orange line on top is trying to convey is what it needs to go up in order to hit your 2050 goals. And that's because the lifespan of a furnace is about 20 years. So if we really want to replace all gas furnaces by 2050 and stop combustion in the home, you really need to back up to 2030 and think about all residential sales primarily changing to heat pumps. And so that's the steeper curve and the catalyst in the market that we really want to try and foster. And, you know, the good news is we're starting to see this change, which is exciting. And we also have some headwinds. This is data from Bellevue's permit data, and we're working on getting Issaquah's, but I think that this can kind of be representative of the market as a whole. And when I talk to HVAC contractors, this is what they're telling me as well, is we are seeing a really steep increase year over year in heat pump sales. The bottom line there is really reflecting that in 2023, for the very first time, heat pumps outpaced gas furnaces in Bellevue in terms of installations. We finally kind of just nudged beyond gas furnaces. But at the same time, we've got some economic headwinds. Heat pumps continue to rise in price. The factors underneath that have a lot to do with labor costs. So we've got kind of an inflationary thing going on. And on top of that, the interest rates going up have really, really impacted the ability for people to make these kinds of investments. And so in Q1 of 2024, we're actually starting to see the reverse, right? Heat pumps are not on pace year over year relative to where they were in 2023. And you can see that the gas furnaces have started to inch up a little bit. And the upfront costs are a significant barrier to adoption. These graphs are a little bit hard to read. They're a little small, but I'll try to kind of walk you through it. A heat pump today in the Seattle area, you're replacing a gas furnace with a heat pump is usually going to cost somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. High efficiency gas furnace is going to cost somewhere between $9,000 and $12,000. That's a big gap. And on the right, you can kind of see that how that cost stack is that dark blue line would be, okay, if you take the full price of, say, a $22,000 heat pump, the dark blue area on the right is kind of saying, okay, that's the equivalent cost of a furnace. And then you can stack onto that tax incentives, you can stack onto that utility rebates. And then the orange is really that left is that unfunded amount that's still the gap that people have to come up with. And, you know, it's significant. A lot of the times when people are making the choice to replace their heating, it's in the winter when their furnace has stopped working and they call a contractor and they need to very, very quickly get a new system in place. And it's an unplanned expense. That's a little bit different than what happens when we see heat pump sales happen in August. That's when they spike. That's no surprise, right? It's hot. I can't stand one more summer without AC. And that's when we see people suddenly start to want to make that investment. So when we look at the demographics of Issaquah and start to kind of break it down and think about, okay, how are we going to get folks to transition? You know, you do have just a little bit shy over the majority that probably do have the resources to make the transition. And we can do things like do outreach, education, throw in little goodies like a manufacturer rebate, do one-on-one coaching. There's a lot of things we can do at a relatively low cost to help get them over the line. Fear of missing out, also big. Your neighbors are getting heat pumps. You might want to get one too. But 44% of your homeowners are probably going to need some sort of assistance to be able to really consider the investment. 16% are at or below 80% of area median income. And I think you have like probably a lot of seniors in that category in particular. And then 28% are what we call sort of middle income, and that's between 80 and 150%. And so, you know, they might be able to make the investment, but they're making trade-offs for sure. And deciding like, you know, is it the kids' braces or a heat pump, right? You're making those kind of trade-offs. So as we think about kind of the structure of the program, we know that we really want to like focus on heat pumps as just sort of like a really impactful emissions savings strategy. It's also a climate 2-for-1, I like to say, because you're not just doing an emissions saving strategy, but it's also a climate resilience strategy, particularly when you're talking about vulnerable residents like seniors for heat and wildfire smoke. Ducted systems actually provide great air filtration as well. So it's kind of a climate 2-for-1. We know we want to focus on heat pumps. And so we've designed to try to think about the demographics of our communities and how can we have programming that reaches all of them. We have a low income track that's designed to reach those residents that are at 80% or below of area median income, and where we provide 100% cost coverage of a heat pump. That includes purchase, installation, any duct work repairs that might need to have happen and for it to operate correctly, and any electrical upgrades that might need to happen for it to operate correctly. And that's not unusual. Get into older homes, they've got old panels and they need to be upgraded. For middle income residents, we offer a specific incentive to switch from a gas furnace to a heat pump. We've started that incentive at a $1,500 incentive, and we're actually testing next month, bumping that up to $2,500 and seeing what that does. As we plan for next year, we're hoping to make that permanently a $2,500 incentive. And then kind of like for all incomes, for all residents, we offer webinars every other month. We do in-person workshops. We actually launched a pilot for one-on-one coaching this just recently. This soft launched it. Literally put it on the website. There's a Calendly link. You can sign up to talk to an energy advisor, which is basically me and my Civic Spark volunteer. And we just make ourselves available 6 hours a week, and with absolutely no promotion, those slots completely filled up. So, and it really told me that residents value this service. And I talk to residents of all stripes. They might be seniors on a fixed income. I've talked to people with 8,000 square foot homes with 3 furnaces to replace. So it's the gamut. And they love having somebody to call and just say, help me get started. How do I find a contractor? How do I get going? And then we also have a partnership with Gensco. It's actually brokered through the city of Issaquah, and they offer a $500 rebate on Mitsubishi equipment. Very similar kind of program operates in Seattle as well. So where are we at today? You know, 2023 was kind of like a bootstrap year. This program actually launched in 2022, but some of the major components of the programming got started in 2023. And on the left, it kind of gives you a sense of the funding. Each city put in seed money for this. Issaquah contributed just a little shy of $400,000 for 2 years, 2023 and 2024. The other cities also put in similar amounts of money relative to their population. And they were really successful in using that seed money to bring in another $1.6 million in grant funding. And that has been fantastic. What I can tell you is we could actually up that number since I wrote this slide, and we have another $850,000 in grant funding from Puget Sound Energy that's going to be announced here in just a couple weeks. They'll be naming us as a delivery partner in their next UTC filing, which is great. So we've really been successful in taking the investment from the cities and really leveraging that to bring benefits into the community. I was the first staff person hired, and I started in September. So a lot of this work was Stacy and the other sustainability managers kind of gluing this together with some vendors early on. We managed last year to complete our pilot of 22 low-income installations, and we learned a lot from that exercise. That really helped us kind of fine-tune the program for this year. We put a slightly different structure in place, and now we've kicked it off in 2024, and it's going to be much more efficient and also a little bit more cost-effective, which was great. So it was a really, really good learnings. In our partnership with King County, we managed to retrofit 137 affordable housing units. We launched that middle income fuel switch rebate. And I think kind of critically is a lot of this is getting all the partnerships and the structure in place so that you can even operate the program. So a lot of last year was just kind of getting those pieces in place. All up, we managed to install 205 heat pumps across the east side, and about 28 of those were in Issaquah. So as we think about this year, there's some specific kind of work plan that's Issaquah specific, but I also want to talk to you about the opportunities we think are here to deepen impact. Not opportunities that necessarily need more funding, but just exploration. So the work plan for this year is we'll fund another 9 low-income installs in Issaquah. That'll be a combination of a little bit of city funding that you still have to spend, combined with that new Puget Sound Energy funding. So they're going to, I think, do another 5 installs on on top of what you already had budgeted. Really, we're hoping to influence at least 50 installs, kind of the market rate and middle income installs across the community. And we're really excited. We just signed a contract with, or not signed a contract, we're close to signing a contract with a marketing agency that will start helping us in May and helping us really get the word out. really working to increase rebate adoption. And we'll talk a little bit about our strategies for that. Scaling up the coaching program that we just started, and continuing our outreach through webinars. And then foundations is a lot of what we're doing is making sure that we're taking advantage and meeting the moment on grant availability that's out there. We have applied for $6.2 million in funding through Department of Commerce HERE grant. That's an opportunity where we'll actually pull Renton in as a potential partner as well, and expand and be able to get these heat pumps for low-income folks out into the city of Renton as well. So we're waiting to hear back on what the award is going to be there, but doing a lot of work to kind of scale up our programs. HVAC, for those of you that are at all kind of connected to that industry at all, and I think I saw you had a connection through your company, is an interesting go-to-market, and contractors often service a really diverse area. We have 40 contractors in our network, and what we've learned is that relying on them to keep straight exactly what incentives apply in what particular scenario with what particular demographic as they're going out and talking to homeowners is tricky. And so a lot of what we're doing is doubling down on our training, thinking about how do we incentivize with leads and get the owners on board. And probably what we'll be doing this year is really focus some of the top 10 contractors in the area and really trying to drive traffic to them. At the same time, we're looking at opportunities to broaden distribution of rebates. And so we're doing kind of a little bit of, it's sort of a funny word to talk about in government, but business development, basically, to find out other ways to get our rebates in market. And I think, one of the things we talked about was the headwinds on financing right now. So if you were to go and finance a heat pump, even at like Puget Sound Cooperative Credit Union, which is a nonprofit, it's going to be like 7 to 9% interest rate. It's pretty steep. So we're doing some exploration with that organization as well as Craft 3 and a Rewiring America grant to see if there's any opportunities to get some loan products in market in our community that are a little bit more affordable. And then lastly, Issaquah is actually going to spearhead this summer, and Stacy will walk you through it, but doing some outreach to the community to find out, okay, beyond heat pumps, what are some of the electrification opportunities that people would like us to help with, and then doing some program design around that so we could do a pilot next year. So I'll stop there.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Tom Anderson here. So I put in a heat pump February of last year. And so one little point of feedback that I would give to the program, and it sounds like you're addressing this. You talked about how it's important to get the installers on board with the training and communication that is necessary to make all this work and make sure people get the appropriate rebates, et cetera. So the little thing that I was disappointed in was I was moving forward in 2022 to do this. I had signed a deal to have it installed in December of 2022. My installer gave me no clues whatsoever about, hey, if you wait a month, you could benefit from rebates from the IRA program and all that. They were completely silent about all that. And well, I got wind of it and delayed the install, and they cooperated with all that. But I was disappointed in their lack of guiding me in that. It was up to me to figure out that I was about to, forego that rebate that is out there for a purpose, and I should be able to benefit from it. And it all worked out, but I was disappointed in their lack of ability or interest. They of course want to keep busy, so delaying is an economic cost to them. So
that's right.
I understand their reason, but if they're in this program, they should be serving the needs of the program.
Yeah.
And get people educated and aware of what's available and all that. So that was one little nuance of the process that I ran into. See, I had some other comment about, well, so shifting gears a little bit, I'm wondering about incentives for non-owner occupied single-family residences. So I happen to be a landlord, have a couple of single-family residences, and when are the rules still the same? When I've looked into this last year, none of the incentives apply to non-owner occupied.
That's right.
So although I'm in favor of moving forward with this, okay, I have to make the economics work for my rental properties. And the economics are is, well, if one of my gas furnaces were to fail, I would replace it with a heat pump for sure. But if they're not failing, I'm gonna, let them
That's right.
keep running.
That's right. And I think the other trick there is, being cognizant of folks saying, well, I'll make that investment, but I'm going to pass the cost on to the renters, and you end up with rents going up. So to answer your question, we don't have any programs specifically around that right now. It is something that we're considering as we think about program expansion. One of the opportunities is to really think about rental properties, both single family housing that's just non-owner occupied, as well as multifamily housing of various types. So it is tricky, right? Renters come to us and they don't have the authority to put a heat pump in, and many landlords aren't incentivized to do it. You just had the perfect example. I'm not going to just proactively do it. I'm going to wait till the furnace dies. So I think the question is how do we make sure that, okay, when the furnace dies, we can meet property owners, regardless of whether it's owner occupied or not, where they're at, and help them make that good next choice. So it is something we're looking at. I don't have an answer to it just yet, but thank you for bringing it up.
Yep.
Sarah, I had a couple of questions and then probably some comments. I'm curious, the learnings that you had from the initial 22 low income, is that coming in the form of any sort of cap on the amount of expenditure? Could you expand on that a little bit? How?
Yeah.
Because it seems like there's perverse incentives both on the homeowner side to get the best deal and the contractor to provide a good deal in that situation.
So thank you for asking that. First, I need to give you a little bit of a background on how that aspect of our program is structured. So the contracts are signed by the homeowner with the contractor and funded through HopeLink, with a little bit of guidance by somebody doing case management. So it's kind of like we all agree we're moving forward. That's sort of how it worked. Last year, we opened it up to anyone in our broad network who was a Mitsubishi Diamond dealer, so that's like 40 dealers, as long as they were able to and had the capacity to do prevailing wage quotes, which kind of did narrow it down. That narrowed it down to about 15 different contractors who did some of these installs. And where it got complicated was specifically on the unit economics. So you would see 3 different contractors come into a home and have wildly different quotes. It could be $18,000 from one and like $28,000 from another for very, very similar systems or even the same equipment. The second problem we saw was that rebates, we rely on rebates, because that, especially the utility rebates, to be applied correctly, because that brings down the cost of the installation. So we want all of those really assiduously applied and correctly applied so we keep our costs down. And it was a lot of going back and forth with the contractors and saying, you forgot this rebate, you forgot that, can you add it? And then we saw a lack of consistency on applying load calculations to really properly size the equipment. And you could see that reflected in the fact that 3 contractors would go out to a home and come up with 3 different ideas on what size heat pump you needed. And then you'd say, well, how did you calculate that? And they're like, yeah, I've been doing this forever. I know. So with that information in mind, last year we had a unit cost of, the average cost was $26,200. Now keep in mind that included some electrical upgrades, drove that up. We wanted to see if we could bring that down. We did an RFP. We have now 3 dedicated contractors, and they are incentivized to keep the price under $25,000, because if they go out and they do the lead and they're able to convert that lead, and it's like a $22,000 heat pump, then we don't have to send it out for a second bid. So they're incentivized to try and do that. And by only working with 3, I have quality control. They're required to do a load calculation. They're required to send that documentation to us so that we feel confident in how they sized it. And because I've worked with them, they know that I'm going to be checking those rebates and they just apply them correctly up front. So that was a major improvement to the program.
And those costs are a little high, as Sarah mentioned. We are required to do prevailing wage because of our grant funding and city funds.
It's about a 10% premium.
And then you said the 6.2 million that you guys had applied for, is that all going to go to that program, or is that going to also feed into the middle income project?
About 80% of it's going to go into the low income program and 20% would be into the middle income program.
Yeah, one of my comments, and I have a couple other questions and comments, but I applaud that we're trying to incentivize equity in this transition. But when you look at, like, if you look at the graph where it was roughly 20% of a $22,000 install, so roughly 4,000 or 5,000 is the gap. So if you were to look at, okay, what do I need to do to actually move the needle the most? It's how many people can you actually just bridge that gap? And the fact that we're overfunding certain people, or at least relative to that graph, means that you miss out on 4 or 5 with the same amount of grant funding. So that's putting so much money into that. We're not necessarily prioritizing. I think in some ways it's like really drastically not prioritizing carbon output or outcomes. So that's just something that I'm sure you guys have all talked about and discussed, but that is one outcome of all the funding going into that, is that there's another point that I think is related to this, but yeah, that's just reducing it. With the amount of funds, we're not able to drive as many installs.
It's a really good point. I think when I first started here, I was thinking through a lot of those kind of same math, like how do you want to think about this? The first thing I want to kind of just clarify, though, is a lot of the grant funding is specifically for low income. So we're applying for it and it needs to go there. So there's a direct tie to that funding. The second component is you'll see as Stacy starts to put together budgets and so forth for the coming year, what we've tried to do is really break down the total target and then break it down by your demographics and try to come up with a funding that's a combination of grant and city that helps you try to have appropriate programming against all of those numbers. So we're going to see if we can try and do all or come close to doing all. But what we recognize is that if you don't actually prioritize, at least as we go, trying to get some of these lower income homes, they just are never going to be able to move over. And there's a real benefit. It's not just a carbon reduction, incentive. It's like there's a real benefit to getting cooling and these benefits into people's homes. So we're trying to figure out a way to manage that in a hopeful fashion.
Yeah, and I think there's limitations too on, well, Sarah mentioned a lot of these grants are specifically for low and moderate income. There's limitations on who cities can provide incentives and rebates to. That was part of our partnership with Gensco, is they're able to offer a rebate to anyone. If we could increase that, we would love to see that happen from the distributor. So we're a little bit bound by some of that. I think we would love to be able to provide an incentive or rebate to anyone that was interested in the transition. We're just limited in terms of what the city can do. But what we are trying to do, Sarah mentioned, is bring on this marketing firm that hopefully can really help increase the rate that we're seeing that transition within our residential homes for those that don't qualify for the income qualified rebates.
I think the second component to me that's really important for market rate transition is the financing component and trying to get those loans into market. If you're in the city of Seattle, there's financing down to 4.5%. You're a nonprofit, and we don't have that on the east side. And so really starting to think about how can we make sure that there's financing options, I think is a really key component of this.
And just clarify, is it just Gensco Mitsubishi dealers that are eligible? Like, is that the only time that an install would be eligible for not just the low, like for any of the Energy Smart East Side?
Yeah, for our 2 program specific rebates, they are Mitsubishi products through the diamond dealer network. I think we need to broaden. Mitsubishi is a top of the line product. It's a great product. I feel great about offering it to residents because I know it's going to work well and be an awesome product. It's going to be quiet. There are other products out there that have good efficiency ratings that are cold climate heat pumps. They do qualify for tax rebates and they're a little less expensive. And so one of the things we're looking at this year is how to broaden our distribution of our rebates so that we can hit a bigger part of the market. And that's, I think, pretty important as well.
Yeah, I think that ties into my second point, which is I think right now we're asking people to proactively go out and install heat pumps primarily because we're like relying on outreach because we don't have a big base of contractors out there that are eligible. So if you get more eligible contractors, you don't have to, like the time, to Tom's point, the best time to upgrade to a heat pump, the most cost effective. And for some background, I've spent 6 months like heavily researching.
Yeah, I saw that.
So this is a topic I'm probably gonna go a little bit longer than I normally would in the comments, but the best time is getting the people that have to change because they already have the opportunity cost, like they're gonna have to pay for something. And so it might as well be, if you can incentivize at the right time, heat pump. And so because we're asking people to proactively do it in a lot of cases, and we're not getting a lot of the people that are reactively upgrading, we're having to pay more to get those people to do that. And so that, I don't know if that's relating to why, I don't necessarily think that it's a problem that it's low income. The problem I think is that we're like potentially overfunding a smaller group than we could, even if it's within low income, because we're covering that full cost. If you can incentivize a portion of it to just get it on parity where they're going to have to do something anyways, it seems like you're going to have a better bang for the buck. And I do think looking into how we could expand the network. I love Mitsubishi. I got a Mitsubishi Hyperheat system.
I have one too. I love it.
But it's not even about the Mitsubishi. It's the fact that you're only hitting a certain group of contractors. And I think the way that you look at some of the programs down in California through Bayren, through like, I think this whole area, I don't know if this program, I think probably PSE and other people need to be involved, but like the way that you ultimately need to sell these through is through the contractors incentivizing.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things about like Bayren is, you know, they're ratepayer funded. So they've had the ability, and they've been around for over 10 years. So they've had the ability to kind of build and expand and really have stable funding for that program. We're kind of an incubator stage. So we started with the relationship with Gensco. Mitsubishi Diamond Dealer Network gave us 40 high quality contractors. So I think it was a good place to start, but yeah, we need to start thinking about how do we get them more effectively through the contractors. Absolutely.
Yeah, I do have one more thing and then we'll hop over to Josh. So other thing is I've also heavily researched heat pump pricing and how quotes are related to certain attributes. And one thing just to keep in mind is there's generally a positive relationship between size of the contractor and the cost of the quotes that you see from them. So the comment you made about we might go for the top 10 contractors, you might then get that average price might go up. So just something to keep in mind is that, and it's often, I mean, there's trade-offs either way, but that's just, I mean, my quotes were wildly different.
Yeah.
And there was very, not just, I was basing that comment on a much broader data set, but my direct experience, I think I got 7 or 8 quotes, and for that out was like, there was a direct relationship between the size of the contractor and the quote. So there's other things, but just something to keep in mind is that I wouldn't necessarily just go to the biggest contractors, like, because they're not necessarily always going to be the ones that will have the best pricing.
Great feedback. Thank you.
Raj, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. So first, I just wanted to say I agree with Tom. My experience was the same when I'm looking at heat pump transition to heat pump. Couple of 2 out of the 3 contractors I spoke with had no idea or did not give me any information on the savings through the program or anything. I was really surprised. So the contractor training will definitely help. Then I have a question for Sarah. So the 22,000, around the cost around 22,000 you said for the unit. Can I ask what size is the house, and is it necessarily a high efficiency, zero noise type of, unit? Because the quotes I got, that this seems higher than that. So I was just curious.
Yeah, that was a quote that was about 22,000 or 20 to 30,000 is the range. Seattle Times has also been, they did some research and also came up with the same range, and that reflected what I saw last year. And that is anywhere from a 1,500 square foot house to a 3,000 square foot house. The pricing when it's on the higher end, again, often has to do with needing electrical upgrades. So a main panel upgrade could be $8,000 of that $68,000. And some homes do require that. And I think the other component is that's kind of assuming the scenario, which is replacement of a gas furnace with a ducted heat pump. And it's full heating. Sometimes, you know, if you're in a townhome, a condo, a smaller unit, you've got maybe electric resistance heating. Sometimes you don't have to replace the heating altogether to put in a mini split, and that's generally a much lower cost.
Right. So just, you know, just from a homeowner point of view who wants to go to a heat pump and who doesn't necessarily qualify for low income or a lot of rebates, basically, what I had hurdles with was, you know, if I want to, I really would have loved to go to complete electric, you know, to actually reduce the carbon footprint. But when I look at that, then I need to have a generator, you know, so that like they were telling me that I need to have a backup generator for the whole house so that, you know, in the event in winter when there is no power, there needs to be something which will still run the heat pump or something like that. So there were a lot of other issues. So my question was, and I really appreciate, you know, how much the program is putting in to increase, you know, the number of heat pumps used or sold. I was just wondering if there was a way, you know, to provide some kind of incentives for everybody, as you said, is through Gensco, or, you know, so that other people who don't get necessarily much cost benefit from switching will still be, you know, motivated just besides the sustainability goals to move in the right direction. I was just curious if there is anything which can be done for that.
Yeah, well, the good news is there's at the moment, there's some really great utility incentives. So just to kind of break your question down into a few different pieces. Number one, even those folks that don't qualify for low or middle income can receive up to $5,500 in incentives right now. And that's between the $2,000 tax credit, the $3,000 Go Electric utility rebate, and the $500 Gensco rebate. So there is like a nice stacking, and that's what we really try to help educate folks on and really understand how they can stack these things together efficiently. So that's good. I think where we see motivation for folks to proactively make this move, and where you'll see us doing a lot of marketing, is when it's hot out. A lot of folks don't still have central air conditioning, and that is a great time to get people motivated to think proactively about putting in a heat pump. So that's, you know, pretty useful as well. And then we do hear the comment about, am I going to need a generator and all of that. You know, gas furnaces actually, generally speaking, require some electricity to be able to function. So even if the power went out today and you didn't have a generator and you had a gas furnace, you would still not have heat. So it's often kind of a little bit of a false narrative. So a lot of the things we do in our workshops, for example, is kind of walk people through. That's one of the questions we always take and discuss. And I think a dynamic you may have experienced is that contractors will sell what they know. And if they're comfortable with gas furnaces, they'll sell gas furnaces.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so one other little anecdotal thing that ties in with that, the approach different contractors do. So one of the bids that I got, the contractor was recommending that I do the install with a heat pump ducted system, but also replace my gas furnace with a little bit smaller gas furnace for backup purposes.
Correct.
And I thought, well, this is weird. I mean, he's part of this program that is specifically focused on electrifying, and he's recommending that I still install a gas furnace.
I had the exact same experience when I got a heat pump this fall. One of the contractors recommended that. That's not uncommon. So there's really 3 configurations for a heat pump. There's a cold climate heat pump, a standard heat pump with a gas furnace backup. Basically, it'll kick in the gas furnace when it's at 30 or 40 degrees, or a heat pump with what they call an electric heat strip backups, electric resistance heat. One of the things I do is when we're talking to residents, I try not to be too judgmental about these kind of things. We just sort of talk about them one at a time. There are sometimes when it makes sense for somebody to have a gas furnace backup. But most of the time, once you kind of explain that a cold climate heat pump is just an all-in-one solution, they'll look at that is the preferred option. But if they don't know it, and again, this kind of comes back to contractor education and having the folks in your network that are really kind of bought in on the mission, they might not mention that, and they'll put that as like the preferred solution. So that is very much a dynamic, and I hear that a lot. People will often get quotes that look like that.
That ties into, I think, the education and like the coaching piece. Like, that's cool that you guys are starting to know that there's some towns, Connecticut, that's like the leader in like coaching their residents, and it's been like, I was looking at the program, it was really impressive. But the complexity of getting a heat pump versus a furnace is really significant. And we interviewed a ton of people that had got heat pumps, and so many people didn't understand nuances of what they were getting, sizing, load calculations. So I do think the other thing, if you expand beyond Mitsubishi has some of the best cold climate. There's a lot of stuff that falls off more at low temps when you get outside of Mitsubishi as the manufacturer. So people are going to have to be making harder decisions, I think, between those configurations. So I do think a good investment of the program would be, how do we make sure that we have people getting good outcomes as well, like being confident through the process and getting a good outcome. Because I know that for my house, if I didn't already know a lot about heat pumps, I probably would not have had a good outcome. And I think I had friends and people that we interviewed that had bad outcomes, like undersized, they didn't understand sizing, all those types of things that questions they could or should have been asking, that there's no guide right now to heat pumps. So I think what coaching is one thing, but also a guide, the questions you should be asking, resources for people in the program would be super helpful, because it's not as straightforward as like, okay, I want a furnace and it needs to be big enough. Just put the same one I had, size I had in, like, it's a lot more complicated. So definitely would encourage efforts to, whether static education as well as resources like you being available. Sounds like a really
Great, lots of good feedback. Thank you. I'm just going to take 1 minute to kind of talk about what's next, which Sarah already talked a bit about. So we are planning to continue with the Energy Smart program. Our 5-city partnership is now expanding. Along with that, a number of the cities are really interested in looking at other electrification incentives. As you heard, and heat pumps are very expensive. In many cases, it's not going to be the first piece of equipment that someone advances to electrify their home, just because of that cost barrier. So we're interested in seeing what else folks want and what kind of incentive or rebate level would help them make that transition. Is it going to be the water heater? Would it be an induction stove for all the other benefits that induction stoves offer, as well as the electrification, or something else? So with some commerce funding and in partnership with a couple other cities, we're planning to start doing some community outreach this summer and really hear from the community what they're interested in. And what those programs, and get information that would help shape what those programs look like. Hoping to put together a very simple pilot that we could use then to possibly grow the Energy Smart brand and expand across the multi-city partnership in the future. So more to come on that, but that's kind of our next proposed step, is really to go out and hear what community members want to help them make that next transition to electrify their homes.
one other consideration, or obviously community feedback will be a great element. I think the other thing you guys may want to consider looking at is the economic case because water heating to me seems like that's the one that is borderline already in someone's favor to get a
Yeah.
heat pump water heater. And so if you can incentivize that, it's lower dollars. It's like really easy to make the economic case with relatively low incentives. So like that one to me seems like, so I hope that it's not just community feedback.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the feedback you'll get anyways, but like the other part of it, I think would be just what is the economic case and how do we make sure that we can move over as many people basically doing the calculation of what your dollars to carbon would be.
Yeah.
So, no, that, will be interesting to see what the community feedback is. So.
Yeah. Right. I think that's it. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I think with that, then we will move on to our next item, which is the comprehensive plan environment element update. And Stacey, are you going to give a preamble or is?
I'll do a quick preamble.
Okay.
So thank you. I sent a bit of a long explanation over email about this, but originally we had planned to bring the full environment element with all of the input from the board incorporated into it, as well as other elements of the comp plan for review this month. That was the original schedule. The environment element, as well as the rest of the element, are still undergoing staff review. It's also been out to a number of partner organizations to get feedback, and staff are working through all that feedback. And so Stephen will talk in a little bit more depth about the anticipated schedule, but at this point, we're looking to bring those final draft materials to you this summer. But it's been 2-3 months since we talked to you and took your feedback on the environment element. And so we didn't want to wait another couple months before updating you on where we are. So tonight we wanted just to walk through kind of where we are in terms of incorporating the environmental board feedback into the environment element, and then how staff are planning to address the comments and revisions that we received. So with that, I think Nancy has a question, and then I'll hand it over to Stephen and David to walk through materials.
So I guess the question that I have is related to, since some of us may not be on the environmental board starting next month and provided input because there is a transition, and myself, I'm very interested in how this all plays out and may not be on the board next month. So how do we get our input and find out what's happening and continue to, effectively communicate our interest in this?
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. That was one reason. Yeah, we were originally really hoping to bring this content to the board this month. It's just not ready. So what you will see tonight is a summary of how staff are planning to address all the comments received from the environmental board. And then, and that was sent out in the meeting packet. And then we can share also with the board the full schedule so they know how to engage going forward.
So sharing the full schedule, is that happening tonight? Or is that going to happen in the future? Just trying to track timing.
Yeah, I think Stephen will be talking through.
Maybe that's a good time for me to jump in and kind of talk through timeline and why the schedule changed. Thank you, Stacey, and thank you, board members, for having me tonight. So just wanted to talk through some of the changes that we had to the project schedule to update the comprehensive plan. A big reason why we had to change the schedule is because our consultants needed more time to work through the EIS that we are doing for the comprehensive plan. Many of you probably remember when we had the discussion introducing the comprehensive plan update for this periodic update that we were completely redoing our environmental impact statement for the comp plan, which was last done in 1995. So we had a lot to cover in terms of reading all previous SEPA documents. And that is what's actually taking a little more time with our consultant and staff in terms of back and forth of covering, making sure everything's being covered for this comprehensive plan update. The other component of a lot of this is making sure that we're doing a thorough job in reviewing all of the draft elements and going across the board in terms of with this new element, that the language in the new policies and the goals are consistent with what we've introduced in some of the other elements that are being updated. Some of the other elements are being updated with new functional plans or updated functional plans. And we want to make sure the language is consistent across not just the comprehensive plan, but also with those new functional plan updates as well. And so that is now we're aiming for probably a July release of all the elements to all the boards and commissions, as well as a broader community outreach of here's the draft, here's the process for the periodic update, and here's all the draft language for all the elements, as well as the draft EIS, which we're hoping to release at the same time. With this updated schedule, we're aiming to get council adoption of the periodic update in December. Does that help answer your question?
Sorry, Stephen, I turned my mic off. It did. Thank you very much.
And I will turn it over to David to kind of walk through updates, and I'm available for questions.
Yeah, so thanks to everyone for your detailed review earlier this year. We really wanted to make sure we had this matrix so that we could really capture all of the board's feedback and suggestions, track changes and input into the environment element. And so recognizing that you do not have a full narrative in front of you with the policies, we wanted to kind of go through and touch on some of the bigger changes and highlight just some of the bigger efforts that are kind of happening behind the scenes right now to incorporate all of y'all's feedback. So the way this is split up, I'm going to start kind of with some general comments that were incorporated. We'll go into some of the new and existing policies, updates, and then with Stephen here, we can take any questions kind of on our update process so far right now, or any clarifying questions on efforts that have been done so far. So just kind of broadly speaking about the environment element, one of the major things that we heard from the board back in January was related to the narrative, the introductory narrative, and making sure that both aligned more with our title, making sure that the introductory narrative really aligned with everything that was going to be incorporated within the environment element. So we've done some rearranging. We've updated that introductory narrative. So now it begins with the natural environment, narrative around the natural environment. We've incorporated some quick facts related to the natural environment before going into climate change aspects, mitigation, adaptation, and exposition around climate change. And then the policies and goals within the environment element were also switched around to match that format. So again, when you'll see the full version of this later this summer, it will begin with natural environment goals before going into climate goals. There was some updates to all of the numbers and some updates to the visions statements for to make sure that the vision also incorporated both natural systems, natural environment, as well as climate goals as well. So there's detailed within what was attached to the packet. There's some detailed explanations of what some of the changes were made related to different specific comments from board members on the version provided in January. Diving more into one last thing before diving into the narrative, the policies themselves. There were a few items that we talked about, including more in the broad language versus in policies themselves. And so that included things like some broad overarching equity language, some broad overarching language related to community engagement, education, incentives, things like that. And really what we tried to do throughout the environment element was continue to infuse language related to supporting education, supporting incentives, inspiring community members, and then also making sure that there was equity language really embedded within policies throughout the environment element. And one of the feedback that we've gotten from Department of Commerce was that really, especially related to the equity language, that was really in line with the recent state law passed House Bill 1181, which was kind of the impetus for starting or putting together an environment element as well. And that House bill really, or that law is specifically asking for some of that equity language infused into the policies themselves.
Do you want me to, I think my computer's back up and running. Do you want me to show?
Oh, I think I'm good for now. We might help me jump around a little bit as well. Within the document shared as well, there are some items highlighted in yellow. And that's just to recognize that we talked about a lot of changes we'd like to see. And although some of those changes we felt like we could incorporate into the comprehensive plan now, there are definitely some items that we felt like we couldn't really address until we did the climate action plan update in 2025 and 2026. So that's a little segue into kind of the existing policy suggestions related to existing policies. There was definitely interest both on the environmental board and then also within City Council about increasing our ability to speak to the percent of emissions reduction that needs to come from our local action. And staff generally felt like with the greenhouse gas inventory we did in 2022 and with the information we have from our previous wedge analyses not having been updated since 2019, we did not feel like we could really update that within this comprehensive plan update at this point, but that it is highlighted to make sure that we do talk about that within the climate action plan update process in 2025 and 2026. That's something that we are going to make sure that we address at that time.
David, question on that.
Yes.
Is our next inventory this year, is it 2024, 2025, the next carbon inventory?
So the next inventory is expected to be for the 2024 year, which means that we won't be able to start until 2025. And the hope and plan is to really be ready and get going with that early so that we can get a wedge analysis and have that inform the ICAP update process in 2025.
I don't want to derail it. I just would be curious if there is any methodology changes that we need to make to that to enable the local. I'm assuming that will be incorporated into the process. If there's anything in the methodology for doing that calculation.
For the wedge analysis in the next greenhouse gas inventory?
Basically, it sounds like there was some concerns that the way that we've been doing our inventories in the past would make it difficult to apply it, what's local versus not. So I'm wondering, is there anything in the methodology of how we do the next analysis that would make it easier to do that? And if so, is that being incorporated into how we might run it for this year, next year?
Gotcha. Yeah. So generally the way, and this is based on my understanding of kind of how we've incorporated the wedge analyses in the past. It's not necessarily that the methodology needs to change too much. It's more of an additional expense and effort on top of what we're already doing with the greenhouse gas inventory. And generally what cities and others have found is that kind of updating that wedge on, say, a yearly basis or something doesn't provide much change in understanding. And so it shouldn't require any update to the greenhouse gas inventory methodology. It'll just be kind of an add-on that we have to pay more for essentially next round.
Thank you.
So with existing policies, I've talked about this first one. That's kind of that local goal, thinking about what percent of our greenhouse gas emissions we can address via local. And then a number of the other changes made. We've really tried to incorporate language where feasible either within the policies recommended, or if it didn't fit within that policy into other policies as well. Additionally, some of the policies recommended we didn't end up making changes to because they aligned with regional goals and efforts such as the K4C, King County Cities Climate Collaborative, agreed upon goals that we are a signatory of. So some of our goals kind of remain the same because we wanted to make sure we're aligned regionally. Diving into new goals and policies. Again, I just wanted to mention that we did not include a new goal area around inspiration or education, but instead what we wanted to make sure is that that language was incorporated throughout all of the other goal areas. So you will see in the summer that there is language related to education, incentives, inspiration, etc., into, say, the building section, into the waste reduction section, etc. Another highlight is that we are going to have a new wildlife policy, wildlife goal, excuse me, and that goal area is going to really be have policies pulled out from the land use policies, the land use goals in previous comprehensive plans, and Stephen can speak to that a little bit more if folks have other questions. And then there were also some goals suggested that we're exploring opportunities to incorporate them actually within the land use, the existing land use elements. So a big part of what happened with the new policy suggestions was a little bit of a jigsaw kind of figuring out what is a new policy, what can be incorporated into an existing policy, what needs to go to the land use element because it doesn't quite fit within the environment element. And that's really what staff have been working on behind the scenes over the last few months. Finally, jumping down towards the end, I want to note that staff were able to agreed with board input around making revisions to language to really strengthen that language. And so some of those additions and edits were made throughout the element. And then we have been reviewing, and Stephen's team has been doing a ton of work on this, making sure that there is consistency between the environment element, the land use element, the transportation element, and making sure that all of these different elements are speaking to each other and in alignment with each other. So I know that's kind of the almost 10,000 foot overview even of this document of how we've incorporated changes. But we did want to make sure that we provided, that we looped back in with the Environment Board since y'all provided such good and thorough comments back in January to make sure that it wasn't too long before you heard how we were dealing with this behind the scenes. At this point, are there any questions on anything you saw in the board packet or anything that I talked about today? Well, thank you all very much. This is not the last time you'll hear about the comp plan update. And I'm sure Stephen, myself, and others will be happy to continue to work with y'all on this.
Yeah, we'll be back this summer on this topic and plan on, I'd say probably a minimum of 10-day review options with some guided input on review. But we'll aim for even greater time for review given the amount of content we'll be looking at.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Stephen, and thank you, David. I think with that, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the stormwater plan update.
Thanks, Stephen. Great. Great. We have Mike and Evan join us tonight. Last time I tried to share my screen, it crashed my computer. So let me see if I could bring it up. Mike, just give me 1 minute. Right. It's working.
It's working.
All right. Go ahead, Mike.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. As Stacy mentioned, my name's Mike. I'm the Water Resources Program Specialist for the City of Issaquah. I'm over in Public Works Environmental. And a part of my position is coordinating the city's stormwater permit, which you'll also hear referred to as the NPDES permit as well. Yeah, excited to be here tonight. It's first time talking to the Environmental Board. Always excited to get to talk to folks who care about sustainability and the environment. So looking forward to this. All right, thank you. All right, so just real quick overview of what I'll be talking about tonight. Just giving a quick background to the NPDES permit or the stormwater permit. Going over a few updates from our 2023 annual report, which we just submitted to the Department of Ecology, and then giving some highlighting some of our 2024 Stormwater Management Program plan as well, which is always released around the same time. And then if there's any time, open to questions, and also open to questions as we're going through this if anyone has them as they come up. All right, so what is the NPDES permit? It is a long acronym to start that not everyone's familiar with. So it stands with National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. This is basically, it boils down to, it's a permit that we get from the Washington State Department of Ecology, and it regulates stormwater's discharge to our surface waters or waters of the state. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Perfect. All right. So the stormwater permit is broken down into 10 different sections. But overall, the overarching goal of the NPDES permit is to reduce pollution from the city's stormwater system to surface waters, as I mentioned just a second ago, just to protect water quality, right? Do our part. So there's 10 different sections in the permit. I'll be talking about a good number of these tonight, but not all of them. Each section has different levels of change over years as we provide these updates. So I'll be highlighting some of the main changes that we saw from 2022 to 2023. The 10 different sections are stormwater planning, public education and outreach, public involvement and participation, mapping and documentation, illicit discharge detection and elimination, controlling runoff from new development, redevelopment, and construction sites, operations and maintenance, source control program for existing development, total maximum daily loads or TMDLs, you may have heard them called before, and then monitoring and assessment. The next one. All right, as I mentioned, I'll be covering updates from the 2023 annual report and briefly touching on the 2024 stormwater plan. Every year we're required to submit an annual report by March 31st, along with our management program plan as well, outlining how we met permit requirements and then how we plan to be meeting those same or additional requirements in the upcoming year as well. So that's the annual reports where you'll be seeing those metrics I'm showing tonight, where they came from. In 2024, thanks. In 2024, let's see here. There were no major changes or items that had policy implications. Really, this year is the last year for the current permit term that we're in right now. So there were a couple or a few new requirements, but we're really looking at most of future requirements coming in a permit that we've yet to see the final form of this summer. So those will be reflected in our upcoming management program plan for 2025. All right. And I see a hand raised.
Yeah, Praj, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Mike. This is Praj. And so the question I have is this permit, I'm guessing, covers only all the city projects and basically runoffs and, discharges from the city projects and city properties, city of Issaquah properties, right? Not every residential or other businesses or anything in the city of Issaquah limits.
So this does include all of like the city projects. It also includes like everything on the right of way, and it does include businesses as well. So I'll be going a little bit more into that, but this does cover a large swatch of, you know, the city of Issaquah, and not just like our capital improvement projects.
So then the next question I had was, I'm guessing for the city of Issaquah, any construction projects or, you know, development projects which are coming up, I think that will get tied into the NPDES updates. But do the businesses, if they have any, you know, reconstruction or any kind of redevelopment projects, does that get updated in the NPDES permit as well?
You'll see that we have some numbers like highlighting how many different site plans or construction plans that we reviewed and how many different inspections of construction sites as well. So
Okay.
we update how many of these we've been to, how many, you know, like formal warnings have been issued and that sort of stuff as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, so I'm going to jump into the more notable sections from 2023 and 2024. And you'll see just this general form here where I highlight the year. So 2023 is the annual report, 2024 is the management plan. You're going to see a lot of the same stuff for the 2024 section, saying where we continue to meet our permit requirements. But stormwater planning, this program is all about informing and assisting in the development of policies and strategies as water quality management tools to protect receiving waters. So this last year, the city adopted the Storm and Surface Water Master Plan, which is a 20-year plan focused on managing runoff and flooding in the city, and improving surface water quality and stream habitat in the city as well. There was a NPDES requirement to develop a stormwater management action plan, and this was rolled into the storm and surface water plan, seeing as they're very similar planning documents. They were put out together at the same time. In 2024, we'll continue to coordinate across departments and keep on implementing the new storm and surface water plan. Go to the next slide. Great. Education and outreach. This program aims to target residences or residents, businesses. So again, not just like city employees, which this we definitely are educating and doing outreach to city employees as well. Industries, planning staff in the city, with the goal to change behaviors and practices that contribute to adverse stormwater impacts. In 2023, we saw some really awesome numbers coming, especially out of Green Issaquah and Parks. There were over 21,000 trees planted, 73 stewardship events, over 3,000 volunteer hours. Cascade Water Alliance does outreach to students and other individuals within the city, and they reached over 400 people. We joined the Adopt a Drain program, which is a great example of trying or looking at changing behavior with the residents in the city. And then on the business side of things, we strategically launched the dumpster behavior change program and evaluated the effectiveness of that program as well in a targeted area. In 2024, we're going to continue prioritizing these existing programs. And there's a lot of coordination we do with other cities, other permit holding cities as well, municipalities. So we'll continue that. Go to the next slide. All right, mapping and documentation. This one is pretty straightforward. We need to have map and document our MS4 or our stormwater system. This year, we were required to map all known MS4 connections or stormwater infrastructure connections to privately owned stormwater systems, which we completed on time for the permit, and we'll continue maintaining this system. All right, next slide. So IDDE, or illicit discharge detection and elimination. This program is designed to prevent, detect, characterize, and trace, and then eliminate illicit connections and discharges to our stormwater system. So a lot of this is our spill response, and then also making sure that we're screening our stormwater system to make sure there are no illicit connections to it. In 2023, we responded to 85 water quality reports. Most of these were spills within the city. We had 123 pollution prevention assistant visits to different businesses across the city. And we screened just over 12.5% of our stormwater system for illicit connections. Similar, we'll keep this moving through 2024. Making sure we're responding to all our spills in a timely way and looking at our system. All right, and this is what we were just discussing a moment before. So a lot of the controlling runoff from development and construction sites lives in our CPD department. So the city implements and enforces a program to reduce pollutants and stormwater from new development, redevelopment, and construction site activities. And this applies to private and public development, so the both, and includes transportation projects. So in 2023, we had 124 sites that were the permits and plans were reviewed for. And then we had 148 48 construction inspections as well. And in 2024, we'll continue to review and visit all these sites. And that includes erosion and sediment control inspections as well. You can go to the next slide. All right, operations and maintenance is really focused in on the city's operations and making sure that we're not introducing pollutants into stormwater. So this is really focused on public works and operations, parks department, and then also facilities. In 2023, we inspected 99% of city-owned stormwater facilities. So this would be things like catch basins or, like stormwater drains. That I think of those when I think of stormwater facilities. We also inspected 99% of private stormwater facilities on permitted sites, and we maintained just about 200,000 square feet of pervious surfaces. So pervious asphalt and that type of thing. In 2024, we'll continue to do that, and a large component of this program is training staff citywide as well. All right, so source control for existing development is another part of the NPDES permit, really focused on businesses within the city. The focus of this, though, is not responding to spills that have happened, but it's addressing pollutants from daily businesses before they become a problem, enter the stormwater system. So this was introduced in this current permit term, so in the last 5 years. In 2023, we had a number of inspections equal to 39% of our source control inventory, which was just about double the required 20% of the inventory. And we inspected 100% of the sites that were identified through credible complaints. And then in 2024, we're going to continue to meet that 20% of inventory requirement. We're going to inspect all sites identified through complaints. We're going to update our inventory as well and provide all of the sites within our source control inventory with educational information on this new program that the city has now. Go to the next slide. And that's it. So if anyone has any questions, and if we have any time, Stacy, for it, I'm open to field some.
5 or 10 minutes.
Go ahead.
Tom Anderson here. I'm wondering, do you have any electronic monitoring in place at various key junctures in the system to detect illicit things in the flow?
Not that I'm aware of. So we do go out and screen the MS4 system. So what that looks like is we'll have staff going out typically in a time of year where you're able to detect if there's any of those illicit connections and run, test to see if there's, fecal coliforms coming through it or other pollutants. And then if anything's identified in those key locations by staff, you trace up the stormwater system to see where the illicit connection is and eliminate it. I don't believe we have any electronic.
Manual taking of samples and testing.
Yes.
That. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Of course.
Don, go ahead.
Hi, Mike. Don McQuilliams. On your source control program, your education and outreach portion of it, have you considered providing spill kits to some of the businesses in combination with just an educational flyer?
I don't know that we've specifically thought of it for the source control program. I know that is a large component of our pollution prevention assistance program, and we've been pairing the two together. So
Okay.
we've been going out to a number of businesses and providing them information on pollution prevention, which is really focused on the providing folks with maybe materials or assistance that they need, and then talking to them about how they can reduce stormwater pollution, which is more of the source control side of things. So that's a great idea, and I will talk to the folks doing that and see if that's something we could offer up at the same time.
Okay. Are you guys part of the King County Pollution Prevention Program?
Yes.
Is that where that came from? Okay. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions for you, Mike.
Great. Thank you all so much for the time tonight.
Mike, one thing before you leave, if I could put you on the spot to talk a little bit about timeline for the next permit. I know we had talked a bit about probably some more engagement with the board, that process leading up to next spring.
So what the timeline looks like at right now is folks have provided comment on the draft stormwater permit that came from Ecology already. They are putting together their response to comments, and we'll be hearing back on those. I'm a little iffy on the timeline for this, but I believe sometime early summer, they'll be providing us somewhere around July 1st with the formal draft of the new stormwater permit this year, and then it'll go into effect August 1st. So we won't know for certain what all of the new requirements are until around July 1st. But if there is interest in engaging more around this process, I'm happy to talk about and explore what that could look like at this point in time.
Great. Yeah, I was thinking maybe at least we could provide a written update to the board in the fall and then talk about what any engagement might look like leading up to the spring and our next report deadline.
Absolutely. Okay, more looking at just giving an overview of what's in the new permit and what will be coming our way in the next 5 years, not so much as trying to influence the course of the permit.
Yeah. Unless others have thoughts. But.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you for joining us. I think Evan, you're on there as well. Thank you too for joining us tonight. I think with that, we'll wrap up unless there's anything else that you had for us, Mike.
That's it. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up, we'll move into reports. I think Stacy has a couple of things for us.
Sure. I can do brief council reports and then maybe hand it back over to you. Just really quick, some things that are upcoming for city council. Next week, they will be doing the board appointments. I'll share that information once it's made public. April 25th, there's going to be a joint meeting between city council and the school district board. As I think you all saw, the letter from Don was passed on to city council. City council submitted a letter to the board, which also included, our message to city council was to continue that engagement around sustainability, environmental issues between the school district board and the city. So hoping that that will influence the agenda between the two on the 25th. In May, there are a number of other potential topics of interest coming to council. They'll be talking about the state building code, local amendments for wildfire, and the wildland urban interface code. One of WashDOT's culvert relocation projects. There'll be a discussion around agreement for that. I can provide more information to the board because I know there's some interest. The TIP will be coming to council, and then also an update on Metroplex. So happy to report out to the board on any of those topics. I have a few other just real quick updates and then flags for upcoming topics on the board, but I can do those at the end if you want to.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Just some real quick updates. Last Friday, we submitted a grant to Department of Commerce, about $1.5 million request for a solar system and battery backup at the senior center. It's one of the outputs of the Resilience Hub project that David has been running. So we're hoping to hear from that on that grant in about the next month, but really excited about the potential for that site. And then as Sarah mentioned too, we're also waiting to hear from Commerce on HERE, which is the home electrification and appliance rebates. These are actually somewhat of a in between a grant and an allocation, where it's very likely we're going to get some portion of the $6 million request for the Eastside cities. For Issaquah, we're looking to take not all of what we are able to secure for heat pumps, but possibly to take a small amount of that to pilot our additional electrification program. So we'll keep you updated on those amounts and what that looks like. And then just coming up for the board, next month we will potentially have some new board members, do a bit more of a kind of welcoming intro for the year meeting. And then our big topic for next month is we're going to do a deep dive into the climate action plan as a preview for a presentation that will go to council likely in June. So we'll be looking for feedback from you all on our report out on progress and challenges and success with the ICAP. We'll also plan to bring kind of a preview of a budget presentation to that meeting. Other thing about next month that I forgot to mention was we'll be looking for anyone that's interested in the chair or vice chair position. So please let me know if that's something of interest to you.
All right, Stacey. Next up, I was going to provide a brief update on strategic plan task force, which it's a fairly large group that actually meets here, discussing the strategic plan. And for those that aren't familiar with strategic plan, that's like where the comp plan is kind of at the 20-year time horizon. The strategic plan is more like a 5-year horizon. And I think this might be, was that the last strat plan? Wasn't that our first that we had done? Is that,
yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah, so it's a relatively new process within the city. And it, like, I think the last one was in 2019 or 2018, something around that. So we're going about and updating that. And that one ties a lot more directly with what's going on within the different functional plans. So one of the things that is new that wasn't in place at the time that the last strat plan was put in place was the climate action plan. So that's obviously something that I want to make sure that going forward that the new strategic plan has that incorporated. And so I think that's something that as that process gets further along, that might be an opportunity for the board to engage, because obviously I'm one voice on that task force, but depending on how things turn out, that might be something that other board members might want to get involved on to ensure that there's kind of a strong enough kind of support for ICAP measures within that program, as well as everything else. I mean, we've also had a land use update, so there's other things that have happened in that time. So it's still ongoing, and I actually missed the last meeting because I was away, but that's something I'll have more to report on kind of May, June, that wraps up in May, I believe. So we'll have more more of an update to provide there. So please let me know if any questions on that process or strategic plan, which is really hard for me to say. But yeah, that's a process that continue to work through. So and then I think the last item was just kind of like Chinese New Year, and other New Year's don't always land on January 1st. I think like board New Year's are kind of, this is like the end of our board cycle. This is our last meeting with this kind of group, or this vintage of members. So wanted to thank everyone for all the service and time that you put in. Know that there's, especially, I think the last couple months have been particularly intense and had a lot of meetings, which kind of seems to be often the case in springtime for us, but thank you to everyone that has taken the time and all the impacts that you've made for the city and for the environment. So Donna, anything to add?
Now, I would echo, thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your time. It's been a lot of work this last year, but we've got a lot accomplished. I look forward to our new board coming together and seeing where we go from there.
Yeah, definitely. I think this was a unique year for us because we had the retreat and some things like us starting to think about the board growing up. So this was a really great year for a lot of different reasons. So thanks to everyone. I think without any other business from anyone else. All right. Well, I think with that, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Good night.